Part 2.
When she left, she didn't feel lighter. Not exactly. Forgiveness, she was learning, wasn't a moment. It was 1,000 small choices made again and again. It was deciding that the person who hurt you doesn't get to define you anymore. That you're worth more than the story you've been telling yourself about your own brokenness. 2 weeks later, Maya sat across from Daniel at their favorite cafe, sunlight streaming through the window and painting his face gold. He asked how she was doing, really doing, and she found herself smiling. Small, tentative, but real. "I'm trying," she said. "Some days are harder than others, but I'm trying." "That's all any of us can do," Daniel said, reaching across the table to take her hand. She squeezed back, and for the first time in 14 years, her chest didn't feel so tight. Her father's death, Maya found out 6 months later. Peacefully, her mother said, in his sleep. Maya was there. Not every day, but enough. Enough to sit beside him in his last weeks and tell him about her work, her friends, the trip she was planning. Enough to let him say the things he needed to say. Enough to hold his hand when words ran out. At the funeral, people told her she was strong, told her he was proud of her, told her forgiveness was a gift she'd given both him and herself. But Maya knew the truth. Forgiveness wasn't a gift. It was a choice, the hardest one she'd ever made. And she'd made it not for him, but for herself. Because she'd finally understood that holding on to anger was like drinking poison and waiting for the other person to die. On the drive home from the cemetery, Maya pulled over on a quiet road and rolled down the windows. The air smelled like rain and red earth, the way Nigeria always smelled after a storm. She closed her eyes and let herself cry, not for her father, not for the years they'd lost, but for herself. For the girl who'd armored herself in rage because she didn't know how else to survive. For the woman who'd finally learned that strength wasn't in holding on, it was in letting go. In choosing your own peace over someone else's debt. In understanding that forgiveness doesn't erase the past, it just stops the past from erasing you. 3 months later, Maya stood in front of a group of young women at a community center, telling her story. Not all of it. Some parts were still too tender, too new. But enough. Enough to let them know that pain doesn't have to be permanent. That forgiveness isn't about forgetting or excusing. It's about refusing to let the past hold your future hostage. One girl in the back, maybe 17, raised her hand and asked, "But what if they don't deserve it? What if they never apologize? What if they don't change?" Maya smiled, thinking of her father, thinking of herself, thinking of Daniel and his quiet wisdom. Forgiveness isn't about what they deserve. It's about what you deserve. And you deserve to be free. The room was silent. Not the silence of discomfort, but the silence of recognition, of truth landing soft and making space. When Maya walked out that evening, Daniel was waiting for her outside, leaning against his car with a bouquet of wildflowers that looked like he'd picked them himself. "How'd it go?" he asked. "Good," she said, and meant it. Really good. He handed her the flowers and kissed her forehead. "I'm proud of you." "I'm proud of me too." And this time when she smiled, it reached all the way to her eyes. There are things we hold on to because we think they make us strong. But real strength, Maya had learned, wasn't in the holding on. It was in letting go. In choosing your own peace over someone else's debt. In understanding that forgiveness doesn't erase the past, it just stops the past from erasing you. Her father had left her once, all those years ago, But in forgiving him, she'd finally come home to herself. And that, she realized, was the only homecoming that ever really mattered.